Shavua Tov and Shalom. I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land, where we bring you those top stories making headlines in Israel, and we do it every Monday to Thursday. Now, you can check out our content online on our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our Facebook community is growing. We would love you to be a part of it. So look for us at Lottel's site. Please give us a like, a follow, and share our content. And if you're watching us on YouTube, on our channel at the Israel Brief, please consider clicking on the red subscribe button, liking and sharing our work. And we are on Twitter, where you can find us at Lay of the Land 5. But let's see where we can find your headlines. And here they are. And we begin with the top story, which is taking a look at the situation in the Ukraine, however, from Israel's perspective. So mediation talks have continued over the weekend. It was confirmed that Prime Minister Bennett had another phone call with Ukraine President Zelensky. Now, there were reports in the Jerusalem Post as well as Israeli publication Walla and its partner Axios, where it was reported that Prime Minister Bennett had pressured President Zelensky to accept Putin's demands, and that Zelensky had been refusing that. Now, it has been confirmed both by the office of President Zelensky as well as Prime Minister Bennett that Israel has not forced anybody to do anything. Israel's role is strictly as a mediator, delivering the terms of each side. In fact, the senior advisor to President Zelensky confirmed earlier today, saying that Israel has taken on the brave and noble task of being mediator, and we are working in several areas of cooperation. There has been some progress. He didn't elaborate as to what that progress was. He did allude to Israel's accepting of Ukrainian refugees as well as humanitarian aid. So at this time, when there is so much information coming at us, we really have to check our sources and make sure that the news is accurate. Israel does walk a very, very tentative line as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine, while standing in solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, but still maintaining those vital links to Russia, because Russia controls the airspace above Syria. It was also reported in Israeli media that apparently President Putin has agreed that Jerusalem could be a good place to mediate talks. We know that President Zelensky has requested that Jerusalem be a neutral base. The question is now, will Israel accept that? You know, Israel has to be very careful, because negotiating in a time of war could have serious repercussions. So Israelis are deliberating whether or not Jerusalem will be used as a point of mediation. And while we're on the subject and talking mediation, our Foreign Minister Yair Lapid flew to Romania. He met with his counterpart yesterday and assessed the humanitarian situation on the border for himself. He is also meeting with the Slovakian Foreign Minister today as we speak. Now, continuing with Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, he said earlier today that Israel will not be a safe place or safe haven for Russians, and that Israel will be joining the rest of the world who have imposed sanctions on Russia, and that the Foreign Ministry is busy in talks with the Governor of the Bank of Israel, with the airports, with the Travel Ministry, with the Finance Ministry, and various other ministries to see how Israel will go from there. Meanwhile, yesterday it was also reported that President Zelensky had appealed to Holocaust Memorial and Museum Yad Vashem's director, Danny Dayan, and requested that a rally be held at Yad Vashem. And Director Dayan reiterated that, you know, while Yad Vashem as an organization completely stands with Ukraine and her people, that it would be inappropriate for a political rally to take place there. And, you know, I can see his point. Yad Vashem is seen almost as holy ground for Jews, for Israel. It is a place of sanctity. It is a place of education and memory. Meanwhile, a Zoom address to Israel's Knesset, which is not in session at the moment, will go ahead by President Zelensky, and Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Huldai has offered to broadcast it on screens in the city of Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, people have been asking what is the situation for Ukrainian refugees, and the Interior Minister Ayelet Shaked came under heavy criticism over the weekend for saying that we will be capping the amount of refugees. This has since been decided that Israel will not cap refugees. We will be allowing Ukrainian refugees with at least one family member to enter the country. Israel will also be accepting 50 Ukrainian athletes. They will be allowed into the country, given a safe place to continue their practices. We know that 3 Ukrainian fencers have already arrived and are expecting 16 more, along with the other athletes that are coming in. We also know that with the aid of our embassy in Romania, 11 children who are suffering with cancer and desperately need treatment were airlifted from Ukraine and brought safely to Israel to continue their treatment last week. Now, from Ukraine, we move to something that I find absolutely quite astounding. We've been speaking a lot about Amnesty International and what we think is their sham report accusing Israel of the crimes against humanity and practicing apartheid. Yep, that is the title of the report that they released last week. But the US director of the Amnesty International US office was addressing a group of democratic women over the weekend, and he made some really startling statements. He said, and I quote, "Israel shouldn't exist as a Jewish state." He went on to say that the majority of US Jews don't necessarily want a Jewish state, but they just want a safe place for Jews. At least this is what his gut is telling him. Now, it's just absolutely astounding. Not just the patronizing manner, the sheer arrogance and the Jew-splaining, as we call it, telling Jews, what we should think and feel. And he went on to say that basically American Jews want a safe place that's governed by Jewish values, which kind of, implies that Israel is not governed by Jewish values. And when he was told that according to a survey carried out in 2020, 8 in 10 American Jews are firmly pro-Israel, he said, I don't quite agree with that. At least it's not according to my gut. Well, our advice, at least from my gut, my advice to Paul O'Brien would be to take a large dose of be quiet. The mask has fallen off. A very befitting scene we in the week of Purim. Your anti-Semitism has been exposed, and has that of your company and or your organization. And with war in Ukraine, one would think that you have more pressing human rights issues to be dealing with than to make false allegations and to Jew-splain to Jews. But on a better note, we have been covering the normalization between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco, and we can bring you with delight that the first big agreement on educational cooperation has been signed between Israel and the UAE. So this will allow for an exchange of researchers and teachers, access to libraries and to content that each party wasn't able to access before, and hopefully cultural and educational events around a common interest. And in another great development, yesterday the first Royal Morocco flight took off from Casablanca bound for Tel Aviv. This is the first time that direct flights have been able to depart Morocco for Israel, and they were meant to happen before COVID, but unfortunately with travel bans, this wasn't able to take place. But yesterday we had that inaugural Royal Morocco flight, the first of its kind since the signing of the accords between Israel and Morocco, and long may the cooperation and the travel continue. So with that, this is the end of today's edition of the Israel Brief. Don't forget to check in with me tomorrow for your latest headlines from Israel. And I want to just say, I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.